Here I want to show you how you can perform calculations between fields in your query. For example, in my pay rates query, I've got for each employee their weekly hours and hourly rate, that if I multiply those two fields together, I'll get their weekly gross. So what I want to do is I want to create a custom field that multiplies these two fields together to get their weekly gross. And to do that, let's go to the design view of the query, right-click on the tab, and go to Design. And then down below in the grid, find the first available field there that's empty. And you can either type in the expression if you know what to type in, or we'll start off with using the builder. And the builder helps us build our expression. And you can do it one of a couple of ways. You can either right-click on that empty field cell and go down and click on Build, opens up the expression builder, or let me click Cancel. You can also come up here on the Design tab in the Query Setup group and click on Builder. It's the same window. Just make sure that you're in the cell that you want to create your expression. And you can see up here it says enter an expression to define the calculated field query. And then down below it gives us some examples where you can take one field, the name of the field, and add it to another. But in this case we're going to be multiplying one field to another field. And so to do this, well, one way is to come down below in the expression elements, and the query that contains our fields that we want to multiply by is the pay rates. So select it, and then over to the right are the fields in it. And we want the weekly hours. When you select it, it gives us the expression values, but if we just go ahead and double click on it, it adds the weekly hours field up in the expression builder work area here. Notice how it puts square brackets around it. And that says, well, the name within those square brackets is the field that we want to be able to perform the calculation on, or with, or include in our expression. And then we need to go ahead and multiply that field by the hourly rate. So what's the operator that multiplies our fields? Well, if you watch my Excel training videos, it's not called an operator, but in Access it's an operator. Let's go ahead and select operators, and you can see over here all the expression values or operators. And the one for multiplication is the asterisk. So go ahead and double click on it and it adds it. Of course you could have typed it in, but we're going to do it this way first. And then after that, let's go back to our query here and find the hourly rate, double click, and that's it, we're done. We can just go ahead and click Okie dokie, and let's take a look at what it inserted into our field here by right-clicking on it, because you want to zoom in so we can see it all. So there's the two fields, weekly hours multiplied by hourly rate, but in front of it it's got a colon, and to the left of that it's got the name expression 1. But for me, that's just a generic name until you go ahead and type in a name for your column. But if you go ahead and click Okie dokie, and you come up here and click on the View button, hey, there it is, but the name is expression 1. It means nothing to me. We'll go back and change the name of it to weekly gross, but I wanted to show you this first. And let's see if it works. So what's 40 times 75? Is that 3,000? Well, let's pick on something a lot simpler than that. How about 40 times 1, 40. Oh, that's simple. That checks out. So it does work. And you can see also that it's not in currency like our hourly rate is. So let's go back and do some more tweakage. Right-click on the tab to go to the design view. And then here, instead of having expression 1 from the name of the column, because that's not working for me, you can go ahead and click in here and delete everything to the left of the colon. That colon separates the name of the field, the name that you want to give it in this case, from the actual expression. So you don't want to delete the colon or type in any text to the right of the colon, because then it will consider it as part of the expression. And so anything on the left-hand side you type, well, it's going to be the name of the column. So if I go ahead and delete or hit the backspace key and type in weekly gross, totally, and then hit the enter key to make sure it accepts it, or hit the tab key to get out of it. Well, one more thing we need to do. Let's go ahead and change the format for the field here so it includes everything in currency, not just a general number. To do that, right-click on that field, go down to Properties, and we're going to change the format. So click in its adjacent field until you see a drop-down arrow. Click on it. Ooh, you got a lot to choose from, but we want something that's currency. Select that. And you don't have to save it. You can just come up here, click on the View button, and voila, oh, that's fancy. Look at that currency. And it's weekly gross, but we want gross, so we can hover over the right-hand side of that column label, the header for that column, until you can see arrows pointing in opposite directions. Then you can either click and drag or double-click to do a best fit. Okay, so that's one way that you can go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and right click, go back to the design view and close out of the property sheet. And let's delete this. With it selected, hit the delete key to get rid of it. And let's do the builder one more time because let's right click to build. You can also type in the name of the fields. So if I type in week, oh, look at that. When I start typing it in, it gives me a list of the two functions I can use in the expression builder, but I don't want the functions, I want the name of the field, weekly hours. So if I arrow down and hit the tab key, it pops it in. Oh, isn't that nice? And then I can just go ahead and type in the asterisk if I want, or, I can go back and select the operators and then come over here and double click on the asterisk, but hey, I'll just type it. And then we want to multiply it by the hourly, HOURL. Hit the tab key, pops it in. Oh, that's fabulous. Let's go ahead and click Okie dokie. Automatically adds the colon to the left-hand side of it with the generic name expression 1. We know how to change that. So you can do it that way, or let's go ahead and delete it. Right click, go to zoom, and delete it that way so we can see it here. And the other way, well, is just to type it in here in the zoom box and not use the builder. Let me click cancel and hit the delete key, or just type it in that teeny tiny little field without using the zoom box. So if I said it was weekly gross, colon, and then I said weekly hours, space, asterisk, space, hourly rate. Ooh, what's going to happen if I hit the tab key? Ooh, did you see that? Let's go ahead and take a gander. Right click on that to zoom. And you notice how I didn't type in brackets, I just typed in the name of the fields, and you notice that the fields are not in uppercase. Well, the fields here in the table are in uppercase, so it's not case sensitive. You can just go ahead and type it in lowercase, and it automatically figured out that those were the name of the fields, so put the brackets around it, collapsed it together next to the asterisk to multiply it by, and wow, that saves a lot of time. So as long as you spell it correctly, the name of the fields, doesn't matter again if it's uppercase or lowercase, just spell it correctly, then you're good to go. So you see how, well, at least for me, it is to just type it in now that I know how to go ahead and, at least in this case, multiply two fields together. Let's go ahead and check it out. Come up here, click on the View button, and hey, we're back to weekly gross. In the previous training video, we learned how to add a calculating field to our query. And in that example, it was our weekly gross. We multiplied the weekly hours by the hourly rate to get the gross here for the week. And in this video, I want to show you how you can group your records and create a calculation on that group, like getting the group's average or sum total. So for example, if I want to get the total weekly payout for each department, I want to first group by department. So get my sales together, and then after I group it by sales, it'll give me one total for the sales department. Because if I do it manually, and I'm like, okay, there's sales for Max, 3,000. There's sales for Bob, 1,700. Sales, oh, that's maintenance, skip that. Oh, that's just a mess. Let's go ahead and have Access do it for us. So to go ahead and group first by department, let's go to the design view and right click on the tab, go to design. And to group, it's as simple as coming up here on the design tab, going to the show hide group and clicking on totals. When you do that, down below on the grid, it adds a total row. And by default, everything is going to be grouped by. Now that's not going to help me because I don't want to group by last name. In other words, the group by feature records from left to right when it comes to grouping, so the first thing it's going to group by is last name. After it finds in that group of last names any duplicates, like let's say we have 20 Smiths, employees with the last name of Smith, then it goes to the next one and it groups within those Smiths by first name, then by department. You see, I can't have these there if I want to group it by department. So the first thing I need to do is to narrow it down, what field I want to focus on, and to group by before I start figuring out the calculations. So I don't want to include the first name or the last name in my group. And to get rid of it, as you recall, just hover over that thin top gray bar until you can see a black arrow pointing down, click, then drag so I can select both columns, then hit the delete key. Okay, good. Now we have it by department. And let's see, weekly hours, great. I don't want the hourly rate, so let's go ahead and hover over that thin gray bar till I can see a black arrow, click on it, hit the delete key. All right, that's good. So it's going to group it by department. After it groups it by department, I want to get the total for the weekly gross, but how about for the weekly hours, I want to get the average. Because let's say if the average is below 35 hours a week for the employees, we probably have too many on vacation or that are sick. It's just not good for our profit line. So I want to go ahead and leave that in there. But I don't want it grouped by hours, so I want to change it by clicking in that cell and saying don't group this. Instead, hey, how about if we get the average for that group? Cool. And then for this one, we want to get the sum total. So see if this makes sense. We're grouping it by department. So all the sales department will be just listed once with the average of hours worked in that department and the sum total payout for that department or to that department. Should we go ahead and take a look-see? Alrighty, come up here, click on the View button, and okay, cool. So it grouped our ITs together, customer service, there's the weekly gross, the total payout to the employees that belong to that department, and then the average of weekly, oh, I can't even see it. Now, when you see a bunch of pound symbols, that means that in both Access and Excel, if you watch my Excel training videos, it means that there's more numbers there than it can squeeze into that cell. Well, why doesn't it just show you what it can? So for example, if we're in the billions and it cuts off maybe the last number over here because it can't squeeze it in there, and you're like, oh, that's what that is. Let me just go ahead and type in everything but the last number. You see, you don't get accurate data results, and so what you want to do is you want to hover over to the right-hand side of the column or the column header until you can see black arrows pointing in opposite directions, and just click and drag or do a double click to do a best fit for that column. And ooh, look at that. It gives me a lot after that decimal point. And I only need 2. I don't need all the rest of the numbers. And so it'll round up or round down. Let's go ahead and save this as a new query. Call it my weekly pay by department. To do that, you want to come up here, click on the File tab, go backstage, go down to Save As. We want to save object as, and then come over here and click on Save As. And we'll change this, hit the delete key, and we'll call it QRY. So we got our 3-letter prefix saying that this is a query, and then the name of the query, weekly pay by department. And then go ahead and click Okie dokie. And now you can see that it updates it here. So I'm no longer working in the original pay rates after I made the changes and I saved it as something else. Again, weekly pay by department, weekly paid by department. That's what I'm in, and that's what it says right here. Great. Now let's go ahead and change this because, oh, that's a decimal nightmare. Let's come up here and right click, go to the design view, and then for our weekly hours, go ahead and click in the field. And we need to bring up the properties for that field, and you can do it one of a couple of ways. You can either, when in doubt, right click. Usually you get something when you right click. A shortcut menu for something that you're looking for, like the properties. Click on it, brings up the property sheet, close out, or just make sure that you're in the field that you want to bring up the properties for, and come up here on the Design tab to the Show Hide group, and there's Property Sheet, brings it up. And then we want to go to the Format here, click in that cell to see the drop-down arrow, click on it, and oh, you can do Euro. Oh, that's nice, but let's go with something fixed. And let's go back and click on the View button, and it's fixed. Well, how about if I want to have it fixed to 1 decimal instead of 2 decimal places? All right, you're working me hard here. Let's go back to the design view, and then just below fixed, decimal places, click in that field. Well, if you still have your property sheet open, and then click on the drop-down arrow and say you just want 1. And then you can go ahead and close out and come up here, click on the View button, and hey, there you go. Now one last thing, let's go ahead and go back to the design view. And remember how the name of this was average? Well, it's this long name, it's not weekly hours. You can go ahead and bring up the property sheet for that field again. Come up here and click on Properties. And for the caption for that field, how about if we just type in our own thing, average for weekly, and hit enter to accept it. And by the way, since we're here, you know, when you're up here and you're clicking on Fix and you click on the drop-down arrow and it shows you the name and then also the number, if your property sheet is so skinny, let me come back to that field because I clicked outside of it, that you click on it, and, oh, you can't even see it. Well, you see what I just did? If you hover over the border of the property sheet, you can click and drag that out. Enough until, oh, that's not enough. I mean, I don't want to scroll because if I scroll too far, then I don't know what, well, I think that's the euro. So let's come over here and click and drag it some more. and then click on the drop down arrow. In any case, you get my point. Cool. And then let's go ahead and close out. Click on the view button. And there it is, average wick hours. Nice. And finally, if you want to get the totals for your totals here, like the grand total, then in your datasheet view, up here on the Home tab in the Records group, click on Totals. Of course, it's not going to give us a total for a text field, just the numbers field. So if you want the average of the average here, the total average of the average, then click on the drop-down arrow and do average, and oh, that's pretty good. 37 hours is our average. In any case, let's go ahead and come over here. And for the weekly gross, let's get the total gross of the gross. How gross. And there it is. Let me click off so we can see it better. Over 64,000. When you're in the datasheet view for your tables or queries, you can actually change the formatting of it. So I got my query here in the datasheet view. If I want to change the formatting, like you can see here, we've got banded rows. Every other row is white, and the other color, alternating color, is gray, light gray. So that way, when your eyes are looking at this record right here, IT, hopefully they don't start going down. And if they do, you can see another color and go, oh, I'm off track. Let me go back to the original color, white. So to go ahead and change the formatting, the alternating color, or to see what other formats you can change, just come up here on the Home tab, go over to the text formatting, and there you go. You can go ahead and click on this drop-down arrow for alternating row color and say that we want something, red accent to lighter 60%. That's a fun color. Select that. And so it updates the alternating row color from a light gray to that nice red accent. And then you can come up here, click on the drop-down arrow, choose something else. You can even change the size of the font here, even the font type. Or you can click on the expandable dialog box button, and it gets more persnickety, a little bit more detailed. You can have raised, there's the preview. Oh, that's nice. A background color, something not too dark, maybe a little bit lighter. And that's going to be the background color that includes, well, the entire area here. And we can change the grid line color, maybe something purple-ish. I can barely see it. In any case, go ahead and click Okie dokie. And now, after you've made all those changes, and you're like, oh, I don't like that. Well, you can do one of two things. You can either go ahead and go back and set it back to the way it was because there's no reset button here. In which case, if you already saved it, you can open up another query or table, double click, and then come up here and click on the drop down arrow and choose more colors and try to find out the RGB 244 for red, green, and blue. Memorize that and then come back here to that awful looking datasheet format and then go ahead and click on the drop down arrow and, well, choose the color here or go to more colors and then type in 244. You can do that, or if you didn't save it, the easiest thing to do is to go ahead and close out, not save it. Let me close out of that one too. And then when you go back to it, it was weekly pay by department. Double click. We're back to where we started. Now you can do it that way, or if you just want to change the font size, not just for this data sheet, but across the board for all data sheets, then come up here, click on the File tab, go backstage down to Options, and you want to select the datasheet category here, or the tab, and then come down. When you got some defaults, you can do your raised, sunken, but that applies across the board. I was thinking more of the size here. Let's do something very huge, 16, and click Okie dokie. And okay, well, this one's already open, so if we close out, then we double click to open it back up. Oh, that's huge. So if you don't like that, double click on any one of these, then of course just go back. And unlike this right here, the text formatting group, where you have to go back and change it to the way it was, this one, well, you do too. But at least this one's easier because I'm not messing with so many variables, at least when it comes to the size here, because I remember the default was 11, click Okie dokie, and then close out of all these, then double click, and we're back to where we started. The third Access object that I want to go over are forms. And simply put, a form is nothing more than a table with a facelift. And so let's go ahead and open up a table here, double click like customers, so I can compare and contrast. First of all, the table is in column format. So if I want to rearrange my fields, I can only do it by column here. Like if I want the customer name to come first, I can move it over in front of the customer ID. Where with forms, I can actually stack my fields one on top of another. How does that work and why would I want to do that? Basically, I do it to control the front-end user's input and also make it more efficient for them when viewing and or inputting data by having them focus upon a single record. Where here, there's a lot of records. So if I want to focus like on Roofit, okay, I'll try to keep my eyes within this line, but it may wander. Ooh, that's pretty kooky. And then not only that, but look at this. When I get to the end, it's not the end, is it? Because I don't have a huge monitor or my screen resolution isn't that high. I'd have to click and drag to scroll over. And so then I'm like, okay, where's Roofit? Was it this line, that line? Oh, that's a mess. Let's go ahead and scroll back. And so with forms, well, you'll see in just a minute that by stacking them, I can see everything within a single window here. Now, when it comes to creating a form, it can be based upon a table or a query, which a query is based upon a table. So your queries, forms, and reports, which we haven't covered yet, are basically windows into the tables where the tables are the only objects that contain data or store data. So if you don't have any tables, we don't have any data. If we don't have any data, well, then the queries, forms, and reports are obsolete because there's nothing there for them to organize therein. Like for our queries to do specific criteria to pull in certain fields, or forms to rearrange the fields, or reports to be able to print our data off or make it printable. And so to be able to create a form, we want to base it upon a table, and you can see the name of this form is the same name as that table to keep it simplistic, so that way that you know that this form is based upon that table. Now I could base my form upon two or more tables, but to do that, there's nothing in forms, and speaking of reports, which we'll cover later on, that I can actually say, okay, pull in these two tables. Well, first of all, the tables have to be related. Assuming that they are related, if I want to base the form or report upon two or more tables, I have to create a query first to be able to pull in those two or more tables. Then I can go ahead and base this form, or if it was a report, upon that query that's based upon, again, two or more tables. So let's go ahead and open up my form that's based upon this table here. You can see I got a total of 14 records. When I open up my form, hey, looky there. All my fields are stacked, so they're all viewable in a single window, and I don't have to scroll. Oh, isn't that nice? And you can see that I'm focusing on just one record and not a bunch of records. So you're probably asking, how do I get from one record to the next? Well, in just a minute, I'll go over the record navigation bar down below. You can see that I'm on record 1 of 14. But before we go down there, we've got our fields up above, and I can order these, and I'll show you how you can create a form later on. But for right now, let's just learn how to navigate through a form that's been created. So I'm in the customer ID field. If I want to go to the next field, just hit the tab key and keep hitting the tab key to advance from one field to the next. If I want to go back, then hold down the shift key and hit the tab key, and it goes backwards. Or you can go ahead and use the right arrow, left arrow keys, and you can use the up and down arrow keys. Those work. And then keep in mind, because this is a window into the data that's stored in the customer's table, that any changes I make here, like we've got customer name star temps, if I come over here, of course you can use the mouse to navigate around to the fields, and I say, okay, you're no longer plural, you're temp, you can see there's a little pencil. That means it's in write mode. So to go ahead and save it, I can go ahead and hold down the shift key and hit enter, and you can see the pencil's gone, so it's been saved. So if I go back to the customers table, is it start temps? No, it's just temp. So vice versa, if I come in here and then add an S, hold down the shift key and hit enter to save it and go back to my customers form, it's back to being plural, the S. Cool. Okay, before we get any further, let's come down below here and let's look at our record navigation bar. So first off, you've got the first record and the last record. You can see that little triangle, that arrow that's pointing to the right, and then you got a line. That means you're hitting the wall. You're getting to the very end of all the records here as opposed to the very first. So if I hit that, it takes me to record 14 of 14. If I go backwards to the other side, it goes to the first record. Or if I want to go from one record to the next, I can click on this next record. So I'm record of 2, 3 of 14. You can also use the page up and page down keys on the keyboard. So page down goes to 4 of 14, page up goes the other way, back to 3 of 14. And then if you want to get right to a record, and you know the exact number that that record is, like if I want to go to record, let's say 5, go ahead and just click in there. delete it or just highlight it and type over it, 5, hit enter, takes me right to record 5 of 14. How about deleting a record? Let's do 3 of 14. Happy Town Play, well, it's cut off. So when I create my forms, I can go ahead and increase the size of that field so I can see everything in it. In any case, if I want to get rid of this record, just come up here on the Home tab to the Records group and click on the Delete drop-down arrow and delete the record. And it says you're about to totally destroy this. Are you sure? Because once it's gone, it's toast. We can say yes, and it's gone. How do I know it's gone? Well, I'm down from 3 of 14 to 3 of 13, and that 13 is an unlucky number. Well, don't worry, we'll add a new record and fix that in just a jiff. But before we do that, let's go back to the customers table, and did it delete it? Well, because I have the table open, it shows me that it's been deleted without actually just having it removed. So you could go ahead and close out of the table, open it back up to refresh it, and it won't show this anymore. Or if you want to leave it open, you can just come up here on the Home tab to the Records group and click refresh. Or you can hit the F5 key on the keyboard and it clears out that deleted item or record. And then of course you can see down below we also have 13 records here. Now let's go ahead and close out of the customers here, back to our form. And let's say that we want to find, like this one right here, fall cleaning, but we're not on that record, but we know it's here somewhere. So to find that, just go ahead and click in the field that you want to do a search for and come up here on the Home tab, go to the Find group, find the find, and then just come up here and click on Find, or you can see in the pop-up you can use the shortcut keys Control F and it opens up the Find window. And then what do you want to find? Go ahead and type it in, fall. Well, that's all I remember. What's the rest of it? Well, if you don't remember the rest of it, then be sure to come down here where it says that you want to find the match, where it matches the whole field. Well, I don't think I have a customer who's called fall, so when I click Find Next, no, I don't. So instead of just the whole field, any part of the field has to have the word fall in it. So let's go ahead and click Find Next, and hey, there we go. Do I have another? No, just one. And you can see the default here to look in the current field that we're in, which is the customer name. You can of course change that and say the current document. So even though I'm not in the field like the address here, let's go ahead and type in this, hit enter. It finds it because it's looking in the entire document. Cool. Let's go ahead and close out of here. And in fact, let's go back off of this record because down below you have the search field that you can use as well. Just click in there and type in fall, and it automatically takes me to the first record that, hey, has fall in it. Next, let's go ahead and add another record so I can show you how to add a record to your table through the form, that is, because remember the form is the window into the table that this form is based upon, the customers table right there. And so we can get out of this unlucky number 13. So to create a new record, just down below on the record navigation bar, just hover over that triangle pointing to this, it looks like a nice little bright sun. You can see when I hover over it, it says new blank record. Click on it, and it's a new blank record. Now first off, I'm going to type in the customer ID. Now this is a primary key field, so it cannot have any duplicates. Oh my gosh, so what do I do? If I don't have them memorized, well, what I can do is go back to the customers table, and let's see, I've got all the numbers here, so basically anything that isn't already here I can type in. So how about 33001? Yeah, that's good, we're covered. So let's come back here and type in 33001. And then you can see up here that it's in pencil or write mode. Let's hit the tab key to go to the next one, customer name, we'll call it McStuffins, tab key, and then start typing in a phone number. And then notice when I start typing in the number how it automatically pulls up the parentheses and the lines. So it's telling me what it's looking for, like the area code and so many numbers. That's what's called a mask, and we'll learn about that in a later training video. It's used to help to control the user's input so we can get what we need from the user, because if it was just an empty field, maybe they wouldn't know to type in the area code. In any case, it's obvious there when they start typing. So let's continue. Hit the tab key. And then tab over the address. Now let's go ahead and save this record. To save it, well, you can move off of the record or hold down the Shift key and hit enter. So if I go backwards, see, you went back to 13, but when I go ahead, it's there, McStuffins. So it saved it. Great. Now, because we entered the record into the form and it's linked or it's tied to the customer's table, it should be inserted or inputted into the customer's table. Now, the customer's table had 13. It should now have 14 because, well, we entered in another record, right? 14 of 14. Let's come up here, click on customers, and oh, rats, it only says 13. Well, the reason being is because we have the customer's table open, it hasn't been refreshed. So if I close out of here, open it back up, it'll have 14, or we can go ahead and click on the refresh button. Let's just go ahead and close out of it, open it back up, customers. Now we have 14. Oh, that's nice. And you can see down at the bottom, it's the last record that was entered, so it's going to be at the bottom here, unless, of course, I set a sort by customer name, and so we can sort it alphabetically, but we won't do that here. Let's go ahead and close out of the customers, back to our form. And next, let's go over filtering. So let's say that I want to see all the records that the customers are from the state of Utah. To do that, we can go ahead and right-click on that field there, and down below we can do filter by selection. In fact, that brings up a good point. We talked about this in queries and in tables that you're going to find a lot of similarities. So in queries and tables in the datasheet view, as opposed to the form view here, up here on the Home tab in the Sort and Filter group, it's the same group. You can filter, you can also filter by selection, advanced filter, do ascending, descending. Well, right now I was right-clicking to do a filter that equals Utah, or with my cursor in that state field, I can come up here and click on Filter, opens it up. And if I want, well, not just filter by Utah, how about if I do multiple criterias? So let me uncheck all, because in addition to Utah, let's do Arizona, but of course I got to scroll down and select Utah as well. And then click Okie dokie. So I now should have all those records from the 14, and there you go, 1 of 5, that either contains Utah or, let me go over and see if we got any Arizonis. Oh, there we go. Hey, we got 1, 4 out of 5, and the last one's Utah. So we only have 1 Arizona out of the 5, and the rest are Utahs. And of course, you got your toggle filters. Like I said, the same thing that you saw in your tables and also your queries. You can toggle out of the filter, so we're back to 1 of 14, or toggle into it. And you also have it down below, so it's being filtered right now to let you know that, hey, you're not seeing everything. So if you click on it, then it says, okay, now it's unfiltered, so now you can see all the records. And then, of course, to go ahead and clear the filter for that field, if I right-click on the field, and I say go ahead and clear filter from state, then I no longer get the toggle field. Now, if you have filters applied to more than just one field, like the state, the address, the phone, just more than one, then instead of right-clicking on every single one, you can come up here on the Home tab, go to the Sort and Filter group, click on Advanced, and you get Clear All filters. So that's a lot faster. Okay, next let's do some sorting of sorts. Like if I want to go ahead and sort my records, 14 of them by customer name. So maybe I would like to have them sorted descendingly. So I can click in the field, come up here on the Home tab in the Sort and Filter group and do descending, or let's see if I right click, if it allows me. Oh, it does. Like I say, when in doubt, right click. Chances are you'll find what you're looking for in that shortcut menu. So Z to A, descending. So the first record here, you can see 1 of 14 is now at the lower end of the alphabet, which, well, they don't have any Z's, but we go W, S, we're going up, up. Oh, it worked. That's nice. And then, of course, to go ahead and clear this, when you right-click on it, well, you don't get the Remove Sort option. You can go ahead and try to deselect it. And that doesn't work. It's still in descending mode, you can see here. So come up here and click on Remove, and we're back to where we started. One last thing that I want to briefly introduce you to is the different views in the form view, and we'll go over it in more detail, these views that I'm going to briefly go over. This is just going to be an introduction, is that when you right-click on the tab here, or better yet, anywhere in the form, well, a blank area, you see the different views you've got. You've got the form view, which is the default view, and then you got the design view when it comes to designing the form, and then the layout and the datasheet view. Now, first off, let me go from the form view to the datasheet view, because when you select datasheet view, it looks just like a table because it's in column format, a datasheet column format like in the query or a table. So if I open up the customers table, you get the same thing. So if you're missing your columns, you don't have to open up the customers table, just switch it over your form into datasheet view. Let's go ahead and right click there. Well, you don't have to right click. You can come up here on the Home tab and click on the Views drop down arrow, and you get the same 4 options. So we know about the form view, which is the original view when we first started the training video. Click on the drop down arrow, we did the datasheet view. Then you have the design view and the layout view. Now the difference between the two, because we covered design view, well, when it came to the query and the tables, you know, when you're designing those objects, this time it's designing the form. Let's go ahead and go there first. Well, you get a grid here, and you get your labels and the corresponding text boxes that contains the data. So you can click on these things and, you know, hover over the border and move it around, but we won't do that in this training video. But that's the purpose of it, is to go ahead and add your fields to it anywhere on the grid here, move them around, organize them, and a lot more, but want to keep it simple. As opposed to the layout view, let's come up here and right click on the tab, go to the layout, where it actually shows you the fields, you know, the labels and the corresponding text boxes. But in addition to that, what I like about in the layout view is that I can go ahead and let me scroll through, because I'm looking at the customer name, Home Builders. Let's go to the next one, Fall Clean. Oh, there we go. Ghost Hunters. Ghost Hunters is cut off. So in the layout view, not only can you select the field and move it around, let me hit undo, but you can actually resize the field live, meaning that I can see how much more space I need to see the entire name and the customer name, Ghost Hunters, by hovering over the right border until I can see arrows pointing in opposite directions, and click and drag that out just enough to see that. Now, of course, when I go through my customers, if I have another customer that has supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, a huge name, well, I may not want to go that far out. That's up to you. But in any case, that makes it nice. So I can resize the fields here, move them around. And so you may be asking, well, why not just use the layout view? Well, to keep it simple, if that's what you're doing, that's great. But when it comes to more details, the design view trumps it. And let me just give you a quick brief overview, and then we'll call it good. And I'll go over it into more details, the design view and the form view, in a later training video. So right off the bat, when it comes to tools, if I come up here, the layout tools, I've got the design tab, and let's click on the more button. Let's count up how many tools we've got here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 10. 10 extra commands that I can use and add to my form down below, as opposed to when I right click in a blank area, go to the design view, come back up here, this time the design tools for the form in design view, click on the design tab, go to the controls, click on more. There's a lot more, the least of which is one that's not found in the layout view on the design tab, is the option button. So you can go ahead and have maybe put in 3 options where they can choose one or the other. They can't choose more than one option, and tie that to a field. So whatever they select, that's going to be the data that's entered into your table, or the option that they chose. So you get a lot more details when you're in the design view to work with, more controls as opposed to the layout. But if you're doing something just simple, basics, and you want to be able to do it live where you can actually see the data within the fields, then right click, go to your layout view, and that's the way to go. There are many form templates you can use that are called instant forms, wherein you select your table or query over here in the navigation pane that you want to base your form upon. Then in a single click, boom, you have an instant form. That's the good news. The bad news is that instant forms don't allow much in the way of customizing the layout. Well, you can, but it takes a little effort, unlike creating a form from scratch in the design view. But if you're in a hurry and you don't care much about the layout, then here we go. Let's go ahead and I'm going to select this table that I want to create an instant form or base that instant form upon that table, and come up here, click on Create, go to the Forms group, and let's do it right here. When I hover over the form feature or the command, you can see in the pop-up, it'll create a form that lets you enter in information for one record at a time. Click on it, boom, there you go. Okay, let's go ahead and work from top to bottom. First off, the name of the form. It's got the generic name or the name of the table that this form is based upon. The form hasn't been saved yet, so to change it, if you just click on Save, it forces a Save As. You can keep the same name and click OK, but the 3 that are prefixed, TBL, it's not a table, let's change it to FRM for form, and then give it a name after it. If I kept the same name and clicked OK, I'd overwrite this one right here, but I'm not going to save it. I'll just go through the form with you here. You got the title of the form, and when it comes to editing the labels, like the title here, or other labels here, or rearranging the fields around. We'll cover all that in a later training video. The purpose of this training video is that, hey, I got to hurry and create a form from scratch, something that's simple and easy. Well, this is one of them. And so you can see down below, we've got a list of all the fields that this form is based upon, which is coming from the customers table. But then in addition to those fields there, we've got some other fields that's not from that table. Where is it coming from? Well, it looks like the orders table. Hey, why is it doing that? Well, this is what the form does. And how does it know to do that? Do you recall in that sub-datasheet training video that when you start creating relationships, in a one-to-many relationship, you open up the table that is the one relationship to another table that's many? Well, like the customers table here, good example, double-click customers, that it adds a little plus sign over to the left-hand side for each record, that when you click on it to expand it, it opens up the sub-datasheet. So you have the main datasheet, that's the sub-datasheet, and the customer here is one customer, a unique customer, because they can't have the same names. We've got to keep them organized. One to many. Hopefully they have many orders. So that's the one-to-many relationship. And it's pretty cool here because if Ghost Hunters gives me a call right now, I can look at their orders and look it up or even add a new order. And it's no different here. That's what it did. So you've got your customers and the one-to-many relationships or many orders that each customer can have. In fact, let me go ahead and scroll down because we should have, there we go, 2 navigation record bars. So you have the main record, which is the outer, and then you have the innie. So when you have the main form and you've got another one that's been inserted, that's known as the subform. So if I want to go ahead and move around from the customers, one customer to the next, we use the outer navigation bar, and oh, look at that. Home builders, they got a lot of orders. And if I want to navigate around within the subform, of course I can use the mouse, or you can use the record navigation bar, and you can see it advances one record at a time. Cool. And so that's how that works. Now, not to go into too much detail, but as I was saying, when it comes to instant forms, they're hard to work with as far as the layout goes, because the layout that you're looking at here, well, that's stacked, and this is tabular. Well, you got the columns like a data sheet. So if you want to be able to go ahead and rearrange these or move them around or resize them, well, if you go ahead and select one of the fields, and anytime you see it outlined in orange, that lets me know that I'm in the layout view. So for the layout, when I hover over it, I can click and drag it around, put it there, and okay, it doesn't, you see, that's annoying. It doesn't allow much flexibility. Let me hit undo. But if I hover over the middle left-hand side until I can see arrows pointing in opposite directions, click and drag, I can resize it. Let me hit undo. But if you really want to be able to make changes to the layout, well, this is what you got to do. Let's go ahead and right-click on the tab. Another way to know that you're in the layout view is when you right-click, you can see that that icon, let me move out of the way, is highlighted. As opposed to the form view, which you can click in any field, you can't change the layout or the design of it. You're just editing or adding records or even deleting them, just working with your data here. So if I go ahead and find a blank area somewhere up here and right-click, I can change it, as opposed to coming up here on the tab. And go back to the layout, you get the orange, and look up here in the upper left-hand corner. You see that little tag? If you watch my word training videos on tables, that looks familiar, doesn't it? Because when you click on it, it selects all the cells that make up a table. And all these cells make up that table. They're all grouped together. So if you want to be able to work these cells independently and not collectively because they're all bound into the table, then we need to change views by right-clicking on the tab, going to the design view. Now, I know this is probably really advanced, but I'm trying to get to a point here that when you go with instant forms, what you see is what you get. You want to make changes to it, it gets a little bit tricksy. So let me come down below in the detail here and click on one of the fields. Then I get the tag, click on the tag. Then I want to come up here, click on the Arrange tab, go to the table group, and you've got your 2 layouts, and then finally you can remove the layout. So the layout you're looking at here is stacked. Tabular is what you see like, when you open up the table or query where it's got in column format. Let me close out. And then the other option, let me go back to Arrange, is to remove it. When I remove it, then I click out and deselect all of it. Then I can go ahead and click on the label or the text box that stores the data. And I get that little gray box. When I hover over it, I get a 4-way arrow. I can click and drag and move that around independently and not have it messed up and working with the group. because once you're bound into a table and you don't remove that layout, it gets messy, as I just showed you before we came over here and removed that layout. So like I said, we'll cover that in a later training video, but that's to give you a heads up that it can be done, just that we need to go a little bit more in depth in training here. Let's go ahead and close out of that, and that's that form, and say, no, I don't want to save changes. And let's create another instant form based upon the same table. Come up here, click on Create, go to the Forms group. Let's do a blank form. So this will create a blank form, but it'll have a list of fields that you can add to that blank form. Click on it, it's blank, and then there's the field list. If you don't see the field list, let's close out. Then come up here on the Design tab, go to the Tools group, and say you want to add existing fields. Fields from what? Well, by default, since we have the customers table selected, it opens it up. But if we didn't have it, you can close it and open up something else. But let's go back to the customers. This has a list of all the tables within my database here and their fields. And well, let me collapse that. And so if I want the customer name, just click and drag it there. And then we can do the address and then the city and state. And so you see what it's doing? It's doing in stack format. That's the layout. And so that's what you're stuck with here. But if you need something quick, you don't mind the layout, you're good to go. Remember, if you want to work with the layout, change it, you got that little tag here that selects all the cells that, well, you'd have to change it from the layout view because it's not available on the Arrange tab to remove the layout. You can change the way it's, laid out from stack to tabular, but let's right click and go to the design view and then click on one here, click on the tag and then arrange. And then you can remove the layout, and then you get the freedom. Oh, freedom. You can go ahead and select the label or the text box field where it contains the data, and then just, click and drag that little gray box so you can move it independently. Okay, let's go ahead and close out of that, not save that. And it's still selected, the customers table. Let's come back up here, click the Create tab, go to the Forms group. Let's do More Forms. Hey, and let's do the splits. And you can see in the pop-up, you can create a split that shows a data sheet in the upper section and in the lower half of the section, information about the records selected in the data sheet. Basically, you're going to be looking at the data sheet up above, and in the bottom section, tabular format. Click on it. There you go. So you see we got it in column format, tabular, and then up above, you can see all the fields in one view. Because down below, you can't see, let's see over here, what is that, facts? Well, it's right there. Cool. So that makes it nice. You can focus on one record at a time. But if you need to look at all the other records because you're like, okay, that's right, Home Builders also is in the same state as StarTemps. So you can see both. Where up here, you'd have to navigate over and try to remember and then navigate back. But down here, you can see a few records before and a few records after, depending upon where you're at. And then up here, see all the fields for that single record. Cool. And then you can see you got the little tags. So if you want to rearrange those fields, break them out of that layout, remove the layout. We'll cover that in a later training video. Let's close out of here, not save it. And we got customer table still selected. And click on the Create tab. And let's go to More Forms. Click on that. Multiple items. In the pop-up, it says Create a form that shows multiple records at once. Click on it. And there you go. And if you want to be able to resize that, because, wow, those rows look pretty stretched or really high. In any case, you got your tag that if you want to go ahead and remove the layout, there you go. Let's close out of that. That's what that looks like. No, we won't save it. And then finally, let's come up here, click on the Create tab, and let's do Forms in Design. Click on it, and you get a grid. You're in the design view. Now, to be able to pull the fields over into the form that this form is based upon, the customers table, let's come up here, click on the Design tab, go to the Tools group, click on Add Existing Fields, brings up the field list, it has a list of all the tables. By default, it opens up the Customers table because that's what we had selected when we clicked on Create Form by Design. And then over here, well, just go ahead and select a field that you want to add to it, click and drag. It adds the label for the field and the corresponding text box or the box that contains the data therein. So with the label, you'll know what you're looking at, the customer ID. So when I click on the View button, without that label, I'll be like, what the fudge is that? Let's go ahead and right-click, go back to the design view. And so you drag all your fields onto the grid here. And you could go ahead and click and drag and move them around, align them however you'd like. And we'll talk about that in a later training video. but here you go. Instant forms when you need something from scratch, albeit creating a form by design isn't as instant as the others, but it could be. If you don't mind, let me hold down the Shift key and select that field and delete it. Just by selecting one, holding down Shift key and selecting the last one, or selecting one, holding down the Control key and just selecting what you want. But let's go from the beginning. Hold down the Shift key, select the last field, click and drag, and there you go. Click on the View button. That's kind of instant, isn't it? Well, I'll show you how you can clean it up, edit the fields, text boxes in some later training videos. Another way of creating a form is by using the Form Wizard. In it, the wizard will ask us a bunch of questions, and based upon our answers, we'll get a fancy form. So to get started, come up here, click on the Create tab, go to the Forms group, and there's the Form Wizard. You can see when I hover over it, it says in the pop-up, it'll create simple, customizable forms. Oh, that's nice. Now, you don't have to have any of the tables or queries selected to begin the Form Wizard, because it'll list all of them from the drop-down arrow. But by default, whatever you have selected over here will come right here. So if I click Cancel, instead of Billing Info, if I select Customers and click on the Form Wizard, then the default here is Customers. Makes it a little bit handy if I just want to work with the customer fields from the customer table and add them to my form. But again, you can click on the drop-down arrow and it lists all the tables and the one query that you can see I have over here and the available fields from that query that I can then go ahead and choose from available to add to my form by double-clicking or selecting one, hitting the arrow, or using the double arrows to add them all over to the selected field side. And of course, you can move them back if you don't want them in your form by individually or all of them, double arrow. Now, if you have two or more tables or queries that you want to add fields from to your form, then click on the drop-down arrow, and in this example, let's do the Customers table first. Select that, and then down below, double-click to add the fields you'd like to see in your form, and it leaves them there, so when you change to go to another table like the Orders table, you can go ahead and add, in addition to the customer fields, the order date, the quantity, item number, and then just make sure that these tables are related, because if not, then it's not going to make any sense to have a form where you've got customers and orders that don't match up or link, or I can't tell which customer belongs to which order. And so it's got to be related directly or indirectly, as we talked about in our relationships training video. I'm going to keep it simple and remove all the fields and just do one table. Let's do the customers table. Click on the double arrow to add them all over to the right. Click Next. And here you can choose from one of four layouts. The first one is columnar, and you can see a preview of it. All the dark orange fields are the labels, and the lighter here, or almost yellow it looks like, are the data fields. So you can see if for the customers you got the first name, last name, those would be the labels, and then over to the right it would actually display the first name of the customer and then their last name and so on. So if you want to see what tabular looks like, you can see up at the top the dark orange rectangles are all the labels for the data fields down below. So you've got first name, last name, address. Then for the first record, you'd have their first name, last name, address. If you had another record, first name, last name, and so on. Then you can select data sheet if you like. Again, all the labels up at the top, data down below, and you have your row headers. Or if you're feeling justified, well, you can choose that. I'm going to go with tabular because it's so tabular, and then click Next. And then finally it says what title and name do you want to give for this form. It's not going to be Customers table. It pulls that in because that's the table that this form is based upon, but let's go ahead and change it from the TBL 3-letter prefix to FRM for form customers, but that's going to be the same name as a form that I already have here. I don't want to override it. I want to add it in addition to it, so let's just give it a little bit more here so it has a different name, Customers Wiz, because we created this form from the wizard. And then down below, do you want to open this form up in Form View to actually enter in information or make changes to the data? Or do you want to go right to the design view and make some more tweakage to the design before you actually start viewing the data? Let's just go ahead and view the data and click Finish. And there it is. You can see it added over here to the navigation pane, Customers Wiz. And there's the name of the form, the title of the form, and then down below you've got the labels for each of the columns here. And that one's cut off, but in the next training video, I'll show you how to modify the form so you can actually see that field. But here we just want to keep it simple to show you what happens when you use the form wizard. And then when you want to go ahead and create a new blank record, of course, you just need to find the last blank row, or if you had hundreds of records, then just come down here on the record navigation bar, click on new blank record, and it'll take you right to the last blank row. So we can start entering in our customer ID, name, and so on, and then hold down the Shift key and hit enter to save that record, or just move off of that record to be able to save it. It saves it as well. And let's come up here and right click on the tab. So there's the form view. You've got the layout view the field list if you want to add any fields that you missed adding to your form. Let's close out. Go over that a little bit more later on. So the layout view allows you to go ahead and, move your fields around. You can see I've got a four-way arrow, click and drag, or resize the fields if you hover over one of the sides of the fields, and do a little bit of designing. And let's go ahead and right click, go to the design view. And we're strictly in design, so we can't see the records here. So up at the top you have, right here you've got the title for the form, and then down below you have the labels for each of the data fields or text boxes down below. The text boxes that contain the data, so we just have one row of it, but if we have more than one record, it'll duplicate this in the form view. So for the first record, you'll have the customer ID, the customer name, and then when it sees it's got another record, it adds another row down below in the form view to accommodate that record, and so on. And let's right click, go back to the form view, and learn how to modify our forms in the next training video. After you've created your forms, you may want to modify them, like moving, aligning, and or resizing the fields. And to do that, I've got my Customers M form. M is for modification. It's a copy of the original form, so if I make any modifications that I don't like, I can always go back to the original. So let's go ahead and double click to open it up. It's a very simplistic form, stack fields, with the labels on the left-hand side and the corresponding data fields, or the technical term, text box fields, on the right-hand side. And so with the labels, I can identify the data that's in that field, customer ID, customer name, and so on. What I want to do here is show you how you can move your fields around first. And to do that, we need to switch views, go from the current form view. If you right-click in a blank area, you can change your views. Now the layout view is a great view when it comes to moving or resizing your fields, but I want to go over that in greater detail in a later training video. Right now I want to introduce you to the design view because it's overall more powerful than the layout view. It's got more commands, options, and features, so let's go ahead and dive right on into it. Click on it, and there you go. You got your labels, your corresponding text boxes, and then you have it laid upon a grid with columns and rows of dots and lines to help you align your labels and corresponding text box fields so it looks just nice and organized. Now if you're going to be adding more fields and you need more grid, because without the grid you can't expand your form, you can hover over the right hand side of the grid until you can see arrows pointing in opposite directions, or the bottom if you want more below. And when you see arrows pointing up and down, click and drag, and there you go. Let me go ahead and click and drag that up and collapse it. And you want to keep this in mind that if you open up your grid and you got your text boxes all over the place and they're not nice and tightly knitted together, then when you go to the form view, unless you have high screen resolution, you may be scrolling around to see your entire form. So I like to keep mine nice and tight. So first off, to move a field around, like our fax field with its corresponding label, or vice versa, to move the label with its corresponding fax field, you can do it one of a couple of ways. You can either go ahead and click on the label, highlights it in orange, then hover over the border of the orange highlight until you can see arrows pointing in 4 directions. That means that when you click and drag, you can go in, 4 directions, up, down, left, or right. Or you can go ahead and click on the text box field and it's highlighted. Now when you move one or the other one will come along with it. How do you know? Well, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you see that gray box? It's also got it over here, so it doesn't matter which one I have selected. The other one has a corresponding gray box to let you know that they're buddies, that they're together. One is not without the other. So that way we don't miss out if we start moving one and go, okay, now what field did this label belong to? So the other way to find out, obviously, is that if you hover over one and you get the 4-way arrow and you click and drag, let's go down off the grid, see what happens. Oh no, let go. Okay, a couple things happened. First off is that the grid expanded to accommodate the movement. And then second of all, when I move the fax label, its buddy, the corresponding text box that contains the data, came with it. At the same level, nice and organized. Let's go ahead and hit undo. And let's do it the other way. Let's go ahead and click on the text box, hover over the highlighted border, the orange, click and drag it and put it up here, let go. Its buddy, the corresponding label, comes with it. Now once I move it, if I'm like, you know what, we've got some gappage in between the label and the text box, well, I can't hover over one or the other, the border, after I select the field, because if I move it to try to get it closer, it keeps the other one at the same equal distance. So instead, if I want to move them independently, that's in part where these teeny tiny little gray boxes come in. So you can click on one or the other, and when you do, and you hold the left mouse button down and you drag it, it moves independently of its buddy. Let go, and there you go. It's a lot closer together. That's nice. All right, let's go ahead and hit undo a couple of times. Come back, and let's say this time, instead of moving one, let's move a couple. So if you want to move two or more, select one, hold down the Shift key, and click on another. And it doesn't matter if you click on the same text box or on another's label, because if you look, the gray boxes are all connected here. These two are together, those two are together. So if I hover over one of the highlighted orange borders, like this one here, until I can see a four-way arrow, click and drag, it moves everybody together. Oh, that's nice. Click off, and there we go. Let's go ahead and hit undo again, because other ways you can select your labels and text boxes besides shift clicking. You can also do what's called marqueing. What that is that when you click and drag, you see how I create this temporary rectangle or square? Anything that comes across the lines of the square or the rectangle or is inside it will be selected. So let me let go and come over here and click and drag. And I can do this. The line just has to cross through the field, or you can rope it in by going outside of it so it's inside the marquee or the rectangle. But again, if you go through it, that's okay, let go, and it selects it. Oh, that's nice. So then you can hover over any of the highlighted borders, click and drag, and you're off to a good start. Let's hit undo. You can do the marqueing, or let me click off. Another way is that you can hover over onto the vertical or horizontal rulers until you can see an arrow pointing in. When you see that arrow, if you click, like right about here, you see the arrow, how it's right in the middle of the phone. When I click, it'll shoot a line all the way across the form here, or the grid. So click, pew, like a laser, and it selected everything in its path. Oh, awesome. Let me click off. You can also do it up here on the horizontal ruler to select all the labels. Click, and it shoots a line through all of them. Well, you got to keep in mind that, let me click off, that if I come right here and it goes down, it's not going to hit city and state. So click, zap, well, address and phone and fax. Okay. So you can do it that way, or if you want to do a block selection, you can click, like in the vertical ruler, click and then drag. So it starts with the line at the bottom where we started our click, and it will end right there. Everything where I let go at and where I started the click gets selected, and click off. So whatever works best for you. I'm going to go ahead and click on one, shift click the next one, hover over one of the highlighted borders, click and drag, and move them right about there. And then click off, and I got this gappage. I don't like it. So much spacing between the label and its corresponding text box, so I can click on that one. I can see the gray box that when I hover over it, I get a four-way arrow that when I click and drag, I move it independently. Now I'm going to try to be a little bit imperfect, and that comes easy for me. So when I let go and it's not aligned right level with the text box, let me come over here and do it to the phone as well. Click on its little gray box, and let's do something like that we've got some alignment issues. Now you can go ahead and eyeball it if you're really good at eyeballing it, but you can use the alignment feature in Access that will just make it look Toodlebane. Very nice. So to do that, all you have to do is, for example, like the label and the phone field, which one's the highest one? It's the phone. So if I want to align this label to the top with that one, then go ahead and click on the field and hold down the Shift key and select the other field that you want to align with it, or at least in this case the top. Then come up here, click on the Arrange tab, go to the Size and Ordering group, click on the Align drop-down arrow, and you got your alignment options. Now I want to align it to the top. So what it does is, with my selection here, it says, okay, which one is furthest at the top? Well, it's this one. So it'll take anything else that's selected and align it right up to that. If I did bottom, it'll say, okay, which one is furthest to the bottom? It's this one. So take that one that's above the bottom of the lowest one here and align it to that bottom down there. So to the top. Now keep in mind you got to select both. It's not like moving where I can just select one and click and drag and move it, because if I select one and come back up here and click on align, I don't get the options. So you can do it that way, or let me click, hold down the shift key and select fax because I want to align the tops together. And instead of going back up on the arrange tab, instead if I'm on the design tab and I don't want to go all the way over there, I tell my students, chances are if you want to find a shortcut to do something and not have to use the ribbon, give it a right click. So if you right click on one of the borders, chances are, hey, there we go, align. Well, let's come over and do align top. Oh, that's nice. And click off. Now what about the labels here? That one's over and that one's closer. So if I want to, well, when I go ahead and select the label, I can go ahead and try to maybe move it out. See, my alignment's not going to be great again. I just don't want it so close. What I'm trying to do here is to get them align the tops together, but also the labels, the right-hand side together. So if I click on one, hold down the shift key and click on the other, right-click on the border of one of them, and go down to align, and I select right, it takes the one that's furthest to the right and takes the one that's lagging behind and aligns it to that one. So align, right, it took the phone, brought it up to the right alignment of the fax. Click off, and that looks really good. Now, another way to move your fields, you don't have to click and drag to move them around. For example, if I go ahead and marquee and select those fields, you can use the arrow keys on the keyboard. Now, when I do that, you'll see that I can move them to the left, move them to the right, up or down. And also, when I move them, keep an eye on the horizontal ruler and the vertical ruler, because when I move them, it'll flash blackness or darkness from the edge of the phone label, because that's the one that's furthest out, to the right of the two text boxes here. So let me go left, and that way when it flashes I can see it's getting close to the 4, and that's right on the 4-inch, as well as over here to say that I would like this at the 1/2 inch. So when I hit the down arrow, you see the blackness is moving down to the, ooh, that's pretty good, 1/2 inch. Cool. Now let's go ahead and take this for a test drive. Let me right click on the tab, go to the form view, and we're in the upper left hand corner. So when I'm in here entering in records or making changes and I hit the tab key, it goes to customer name, shoots over to phone, fax, then it goes back to address. I don't like the way that when I hit the tab key, the order that it follows. I'd rather have it go from, well, this column of fields than over to the next. So to change the tab order, let's right click in a blank area, go to the design view, and then come up here on the design tab to the tools group and click on tab order. And there you go. This is how it tabs. So first off, it goes from the customer ID to the customer name, and then it goes over to phone and then fax. And so if you want to shake that up, there's a couple of things you can do. First off, well, let me come down below and explain auto order. Auto order, when you click on that, what it does is it looks in the upper leftmost corner of your form and it looks at that field, which is customer ID. So that's going to be the first one when I hit auto order. And then it goes over to the right and it says, is there anything at that level onto the right hand side? No. So it goes down to the next level over to the left hand side and it's customer name. Then it comes over here, and if there's anything at that level, like phone, it looks like phone. I mean, at that same level, it could be slightly below it. In any case, it'll go over there. And then once it's finished going at that level, if you have additional fields over to the right, then it will swing back, kind of like a typewriter. You start at the top, you hit return, goes to the next level, go to the end, hit return, goes to the next level. And so let's go ahead and hit the button. Right now, it's customer ID, customer name, and then it goes over to phone, fax, and it comes back over here. Hit auto order, and it looks like the only thing that changed was address and fax. So it goes customer ID, customer name, then at that level over to phone. Anything else to the right of that at that level? No. So it goes back and returns down to the next lower level, which is address. Then it goes to fax, then it comes back to city. Anything to the right of city? No. So it returns and it continues on down that line. So I don't want it to do that. What I want it to do is to go, well, in this column of fields first and then over to the next one. So let's take a look. Customer ID, customer name. Okay, the next one's address. So to move that, just hover over the row header, that gray box until you can see a black arrow. Click on it. It selects the entire field there. Then click on it again, and you can move that and rearrange it. Oh, that's fun. Now, if you want to do block selections, then go ahead and, well, let's see if we can click off or click on another field and start over. Just go ahead and click on the row header for the address. Don't let go of the mouse and go down and select your block, and then go ahead and click anywhere. Well, what used to be a gray area for the row headers is now black, and then click and drag and move that around, but I won't do that. Let's go ahead and click on another row header. So let's do this. Customer ID, customer name, address, that's good. Now we want the city, so let me click on the row header for city, click and drag that up after address. Then it goes state and postal code. So let me click on state, drag down to postal code, then click and drag those two and put it right underneath city, and then it will come over to phone and then fax. It all looks grisly. Let's go ahead and click Okie dokie, take it for a test drive. Right click on the tab, go to our form view, upper left hand corner, hit the tab key, it goes down, 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 then it flips over, down, then it goes to the next record, starting back with customer ID. Cool. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please see the description below this video.